I pulled into the driveway expecting a dinner, nothing more, nothing less. My sister had texted something vague a few days before. Dad wants us all together, don't be late. That was it. No context, no warmth, just the usual, do what's expected. It had been 7 months since I last walked through that front door in San Antonio. Same tile, same smell of lemon cleaner masking the tension in the air. As I stepped in, it hit me. The house was full, but something about it felt hollow. Maybe it was the silence that followed my hello. Or maybe it was the way Mom looked past me and asked Blythe if she wanted more wine before even acknowledging I was there. Blythe sat at the far end of the table, perfectly lit by the chandelier, dressed like she was about to host a gala. She stood, hugged me with one arm, and said, "You look rustic." Then she turned and kept talking to Dad. Callan, our father, was already seated at the head of the table. He didn't stand. Just gave me a nod like I was someone who used to matter. And Judith, my mother, gave me that polite smile she reserved for store clerks and PTA meetings. Nothing in her eyes landed. Dinner started without a toast, without grace, just dishes being passed in mechanical order. Blythe laughed at her own stories. Dad listened intently. I sat, chewing, watching, nodding when someone made a joke I didn't hear. Then he said it. "We need to discuss the estate." He slid 3 documents across the table. One to Blythe, one to Judith, and one to himself. Nothing in my direction. My fork paused mid-air. I looked at him, then down at the empty place setting in front of me. "Where's mine?" I asked, as steady as I could manage. "You're not being left out," he said without missing a beat. "You're being left something different." Mom folded her napkin, looked at her plate. "We thought Montana might be good for you," she added softly. Blythe leaned back, her tone sweet as tea. "That place has so much charm now. Nature's really taken it back, hasn't it?" Callan reached under the table and pulled out a small manila envelope, handed it to me like it was an award. I opened it. Inside was a deed to Grandpa Ellis's cabin. I hadn't seen that place since I was 13. I remembered mice running along the rafters, the roof leaking in 3 places, and the damp smell that lived in your clothes for days. It wasn't a home. It was a punishment. Blythe, meanwhile, had just been handed a $700,000 condo in San Antonio, 10 minutes from downtown. "We wanted to give her something close," Judith said. "She's starting that nonprofit, and she's done so much for the family brand." Callan folded his hands. Some people build value, others need time to find it. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. No one looked at me as I slipped the envelope back inside my purse. I didn't need a full explanation to understand what had just happened. It wasn't just about property. It was about place. And mine was somewhere far, forgotten, and cold. Blythe raised her glass. "You'll love the fresh air, Mavis." I stared at my plate, pretending the peas hadn't gone cold. The worst part wasn't the decision. It was the way they'd packaged it as thoughtful. Judith poured more wine. "This doesn't mean we love you any less." And that was it. The rest of dinner went on like any other. No one asked how I was doing. No one even mentioned Montana again. I excused myself after dessert, said I had work early. No one offered to walk me out. As I stood, my hand brushed against the tablecloth. Old, frayed embroidery. I remembered that stitch pattern. Grandpa had made it himself, a lifetime ago. No one else at the table even noticed it was still there. I folded my napkin, placed it on the edge of my plate, and left. Outside, the air was heavier than it had any right to be. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel for a long minute. The envelope lay on the passenger seat, staring back at me. I didn't turn on the radio, just started the engine. Somewhere between their driveway and the interstate, a memory slipped in. I was 13. It was the summer I stayed with Grandpa Ellis. He called me the only one who listens. I didn't understand it then. Maybe I still didn't. But in that cabin, despite the mold and the silence, I felt chosen, not for what I could become, but for who I already was. In the rearview mirror, the house behind me glowed warmly. But it felt colder than the snow I hadn't yet met in Montana. The drive from the airport to the cabin was long and quiet. I didn't play music. I didn't take calls. Not that anyone from home would have called anyway. The sun was already leaning west by the time the gravel under my tires started sounding familiar. The cabin sat there like it hadn't moved an inch since the last time I left it. Except now it looked worse. Porch sagging to one side, shutters cracked and half-hanging, roof sagged under patches of last week's snow that refused to melt. This wasn't just old wood. It was abandonment made visible. No one checked if I landed. No one texted to see if I'd arrived. Not Blythe. Not Judith. Not Callan. Inside, the air was still. Not dead, just paused. Like the house had been holding its breath for 20 years. There was a coffee mug on the window ledge with a dried brown ring inside. Grandpa Ellis's boots still stood near the door, scuffed but upright, like he might walk in any second and ask why I brought my big city nonsense here. I dropped my bag next to the folded deed on the chipped kitchen counter. For a second, I just stood there, listening. To what? I don't know. I said, out loud, to the walls, to the mold, to myself. So this is what I was worth. That night, I lit a few candles, pulled the heavy curtains closed, and plugged my phone into the solar battery pack I had stuffed in the side of my luggage. A little planning, not enough. Notifications blinked awake, no missed calls from family, just a string of promotional emails and a text from Marlene, an old coworker from back when I still answered to someone else's deadlines. Why didn't you show up? You looked great in that group photo, though. I blinked at it, then tapped open the link she'd attached. It was a photo, posted by Blythe. Dad, Mom, Blythe's fiancé. A few extended family members, smiling like catalog models, champagne flutes mid-toast, everyone in white and beige, all matching like this was some curated ad for generational harmony. And right there, tagged in the caption, my name. Such a beautiful afternoon with the whole family. Legacy, Hallard family first. But I wasn't in the photo. I read the caption again. Zoomed in. Scanned every face. Counted them. Looked for a shadow. A reflection. Anything. Nothing. They'd tagged me manually. To make it look like I was there. A placeholder. A ghost. You weren't just forgotten. You were deleted. I put the phone down and stared at the wall for a while. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just sat there feeling hollow. The next morning, Judith called. I didn't want to answer. I did anyway. Her voice was syrupy, sweet. Sweet in that way people use when they're about to do something sharp and need it to sound soft. I hope you're settling in. Your father and I just want you to have peace. I didn't respond. She went on. There's just one more thing we need from you. A signature. Nothing major. It's just a formality, really. I was quiet. She kept going. It's for tax purposes. It would just be simpler if you signed off, formally, on any inheritance claims. That way we can wrap up all this paperwork. Start fresh. Move on. No apology. No recognition of what they'd done. Just bureaucracy. Dressed in familial concern. I said, email it. Then I hung up. Looked out the window. The snow was falling again. Not heavy, just enough to remind me how far gone spring still was. Later that day, I walked out into the woods behind the cabin. No trail. Just faded memory of paths Grandpa used to clear with an old axe and some cussed breath. Every step forward made the past feel closer, not farther. Trees were thicker than I remembered. But the rhythm of it all, the hush between branches, the smell of bark and cold, that hadn't changed. I thought of Ellis showing me how to split kindling, teaching me how to listen to the wind and tell when a storm was bluffing, telling me once while whittling, you don't always have to answer noise. Sometimes silence is stronger. Back then, I thought he meant being polite. I was wrong. I stopped in a clearing, looked up at the sky. Flat gray, indifferent. They counted on me staying quiet, I said aloud. Back inside the cabin, I pulled out the deed again. I didn't hold it like a burden this time. I placed it on the wooden table, the same table I'd eaten soup on as a child, The same one with the scratch down the middle from when Grandpa once slammed his hammer by mistake and muttered words I wasn't supposed to hear. This wasn't a sentence anymore. It wasn't exile. It was a beginning. Not hope, not revenge, just resolve. I woke up before the light reached the windows. My breath fogged in the air. I could see it, little clouds rising and falling, while I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in the same blanket I'd had since college. My fingers were stiff, and the wood stove had gone cold. I got up, added the logs I'd split 2 days ago, and knelt beside the cast-iron box like it was some kind of altar. The fire caught slower than usual. I watched the flame crawl up the bark, twist around the edges. It felt reluctant, like everything else in this place. The cabin creaked while I moved through it, slow, cautious, half resenting myself for feeling attached to anything inside. I was checking drawers, shelves, corners, not out of curiosity, not even out of boredom, just to prove the house was still mine. Then I tripped, not badly, just a heel catch under the bookshelf. I backed up, checked the board, loose, not water damaged, lifted too easily. There was a drawer tucked behind it, part of an old dresser no longer there. I'd never noticed it before, the kind of drawer you wouldn't think twice about unless the floor made you stumble. I checked the corners, the lock. It was rusted, nothing dramatic. I didn't have a key, but something told me I had seen one. I walked back to the bathroom and checked behind the mirror. I'd noticed a piece of tape there yesterday. At the time, it seemed random. Now it didn't. The key was taped to the mirror's back. I peeled it off, walked it back, turned it once. The lock clicked. Inside was an envelope, yellowed, taped shut poorly, torn and resealed with something like glue stick or prayer. On the front, in handwriting I hadn't seen in over 20 years, my name, not to my granddaughter, not to the family, just Mavis. I sat down on the floor and opened it, not carefully, not slowly. I didn't have room left for rituals. The paper inside was stiff, folded once, the kind of fold made by calloused fingers. It started simply, "If you're reading this, it means the others didn't tell you the truth." No greeting, no softness. Ellis's writing was direct, small loops, tilted left. "I wanted you to have the cabin, not because it's beautiful, not because it's valuable, but because I trusted you not to sell what matters." He mentioned the woods behind the house, the well, the boundary lines no one had touched since the 1950s. He referenced tax records, mineral surveys, documents I hadn't found yet. "You were the one who sat quietly and still paid attention, not like the others. You didn't need to perform to be present. That's something I always saw." I had to pause. My hands weren't shaking because of the cold anymore. Further down, "They think silence is weakness, but you knew when to speak by not speaking." Then the ink faded. Water damage, maybe mildew, maybe condensation from years inside the drawer. But one line still visible. Barely. "Judith said this would cause trouble. If they bury this, please know I didn't." I pressed the paper flat against my knees. Read it twice more. Then again. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because there wasn't anything left to cry out. What there was something harder, more defined. I didn't want to move, but I stood. My legs remembered things I hadn't. And just like that, a memory came back, uninvited. I was 22. I'd just gotten a small grant for an art exhibit, my first one. I came home for dinner, held the certificate like it meant something. I even framed it before showing them. Judith glanced once. "That's cute. Blythe's hosting her first citywide gala this week. Big turnout. They put her on the council poster." Callan didn't even look up from his tablet. "Mavis, can you clear the garage sometime this weekend? I need to get the mower out." I'd nodded. Of course I had. Back then, I didn't see it for what it was. Not until now. That was the night I stopped being seen. No door slammed, no argument, no cruel words, just a quiet removal. The kind of exile you don't feel until you're already gone. I folded the letter, held it in my hand as I walked out back toward the tree line. The old pine where Ellis used to sit, legs stretched, smoking a pipe he never lit because he'd promised Judith he'd quit. I stood there. Read the letter again. The air didn't move. My own breath felt like it echoed. They didn't even destroy this right, I said. Back inside, I placed the letter on the table, right next to the deed. Two things they hadn't counted on me finding. No announcements, no yelling, no revenge speeches, just a beginning, a quiet one. The email landed in my inbox just after I finished sweeping the ash out of the fireplace. Subject line, "Join us, Legacy of Giving Gala, honoring the Truitt family." I didn't open it right away. Honestly, I thought it was spam, but the sender caught my eye. San Antonio Community Foundation. I clicked. Right there at the top of the newsletter was Blythe. Her smile was polished, practiced. The headline read, "A Daughter's Legacy, Blythe Truitt to speak on family, philanthropy, and preservation." Beneath that was a photo of the cabin, the same cabin I was standing in, same angle I'd shot years ago on a disposable camera. Except now, color-corrected, lit perfectly, made to look like the centerpiece of someone else's story. There was no mention of me, not in the invite, not in the program. I checked my junk folder, nothing, no one called, no one asked if I wanted to attend. It was being held in the same city I grew up in. I knew the venue. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but to them, I was just a shadow, familiar feeling. Except this time, it wasn't just private, it was strategic. That night, I didn't dress up, didn't drive into town, didn't crash the party. I watched it live. Curled up under the same wool blanket Grandpa used to throw over the couch, I sat in front of my laptop, the stream buffering for a moment before it came into focus. Applause. Blythe took the stage like she'd trained for it, probably had. Tonight, I want to honor the land that raised us, the man who gave us vision, and the quiet traditions we continue through legacy, she said. She talked about Grandpa Ellis, about summers we spent in the woods, about the hard work of restoring the old family cabin together. Together. There were no photos of her with dirt under her nails, scrubbing mildew off floorboards. No evidence of her ever stepping foot inside since the funeral. But the story was being told. And the room was swallowing it whole. Then came the photo. Blythe held up a framed image, Grandpa Ellis, standing with the cabin behind him, leaning on his cane. I knew that photo. I'd taken it, on a Sunday morning after we fixed the roof. Not a mention. The moderator closed with, "Blythe Truitt, Family Heir Historic Trust Board Member, a true keeper of legacy." Not one slide, not one word, not one breath that hinted I even existed. When the stream ended, I just sat there. Then my phone buzzed, a DM, from someone I hadn't seen since high school. "You looked amazing tonight. That speech. Wow." I blinked. What? I opened Instagram. Blythe had posted a photo from the gala, smiling with her arm around the moderator. Caption: "Couldn't have done it without my sister, #Truitt Legacy." She tagged me. I wasn't there. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't been consulted. I hadn't been asked to speak. And yet, she made it look like I had been part of the show. I clicked through to the official program, a downloadable PDF. There it was, page 3, under Acknowledgements. Marcia Truitt, early contributor, remote. Marcia, a single line. They gave me a new name so I wouldn't notice mine was missing. I didn't message her. I didn't comment. I didn't even block her. I just closed my laptop. Stepped outside. Let the air hit my face, cold enough to sting. The stars were sharp tonight. No clouds. No sound. Just the kind of stillness that wraps around your ears and holds your breath hostage. "That story isn't hers," I said. Not a scream. Not even anger. Just a statement. I walked back inside. Grabbed my old notebook. The one I'd used in college when I thought I might write children's books one day. I opened to the first page and started writing. Not for publication, not for a court, not for revenge, just facts. The first night I spent in the cabin. What I found in the floorboards, the coffee mug by the window. The deed, the letter, the sound of mice chewing behind the walls. The day I patched the broken window myself. Everything. I wrote down dates, names, details only. Someone who lived it would know. I printed screenshots of the posts, the photos, the comments. This wasn't about getting credit anymore. This was about preserving the truth. Because if they'd rewritten this, what else were they willing to erase? I laid the notebook beside the deed, beside Ellis's letter. My own archive. No press release, no counterpost, just the quiet, intentional act of remembering. They would try again, I knew. This wasn't the end. But this time, when they came for the story, I'd already have it written. I didn't sleep much after the gala, not because of what Blythe said, God knows that wasn't new, but because of how easily it all slid into place, like the story had always belonged to her, and I'd just wandered through by accident. So I cleaned, not to feel better, not to be useful, because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to let the place rot the way they let our family truth rot, and honestly, I needed something to do with my hands besides clenching them. I started in the back closet. Grandpa's old workbench was tucked in the corner, covered in dust, but still upright. A few boxes sat underneath. One caught my eye, taped shut, labeled mapping. Inside were tools, landmarkers, old topographic maps rolled tight and rubber-banded. I didn't know why, but I felt like I was supposed to find that box. Later that afternoon, while moving the bed to vacuum beneath it, a floorboard shifted under my foot. Not a loud sound. Just a hollow click, like it wasn't attached the way it should have been. I crouched. The board came up easier than it should have. Beneath it was a shallow cutout, a square recess. At the center, a small, rusted latch. I popped it open. Inside was a metal lockbox. I carried it to the kitchen and set it on the table. I didn't breathe until I flipped it open. Inside were envelopes, yellowed maps, handwritten ledgers, mineral rights, deeds, coordinates, boundaries, and all of them in Grandpa Ellis's name. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I checked the names again, then dates, then property lines. The paperwork was legit. It didn't hit me like thunder. It came quiet, slow. He hadn't left me a falling down cabin. He'd left me something no one else would have thought to guard. I laid everything out on the floor, knees on cold wood, document after document, parcels of land spanning across counties, timber rights in places I'd never heard of. A certified appraisal dated from 12 years ago, just one property estimated at over $12 million. But what froze me wasn't the numbers. It was a handwritten note tucked between two maps. To the one who doesn't look for glory, only roots. It wasn't just inheritance, it was intention. Quiet, deliberate intention. Ellis hadn't overlooked me. He'd trusted me. The cabin wasn't exile, it was insulation. He knew they'd try to take it apart if he'd left it to anyone else. And right then, I understood. He knew exactly who he was keeping it from. I was still on the floor, sorting, labeling, when there was a knock at the door. A knock in this place after dark was rare. I stood, tucked one of the folders under the couch cushion, then opened the door. It was Mr. Griffin, old as the hills, wearing the same patched denim coat he'd worn since I was a kid. "Figured someone finally came back," he said. I invited him in. He refused, just stood with his hand on the railing. "You find any of Ellis's maps yet?" he asked, like he already knew. I nodded. He gave me a look, sharp but not unkind. He turned down a buyout back in '98, big company, wanted the back acreage. Ellis said, "Not if it means someone else names the trees." He paused, longer than I expected. Then, he used to say, "That girl sees things quiet. She's not like the others." That one landed. I didn't cry, but something inside folded. He stepped back down off the porch. "Whatever he left you, it's yours. Don't let them rewrite what he meant." Then he walked off into the dark like he'd never been there at all. I went back inside, locked the door, took the file off the couch, and I got to work. I cataloged every page, took photos, created folders, scanned everything into a drive, named the master folder, proof of lineage. I wasn't acting out of anger anymore, not shame either, just clarity. I traced ownership history, researched tax IDs, cross-referenced Ellis's handwriting with public records. No one had ever asked me to do this, but I knew damn well, if I didn't, someone else would do it wrong. "They thought leaving me here was exile," I said aloud. I glanced at the fire, burning low in the stove. They were wrong. The call came just after noon. I was in the middle of labeling a deed transfer from 1984 when the screen lit up. The name read, Blythe Truitt. I stared at it, let it ring once, twice. On the third, I answered. Mavis, she said, like we'd spoken last week. I'm in Helena for a few days. Thought maybe we could catch up. Her voice was like warm tea with something sharp at the bottom, too smooth, too planned. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. We met the next morning at a cafe 2 blocks from the county clerk's office. She chose the place. Of course she did. I sat by the window. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed like she was about to be interviewed for a profile piece. Isn't this town quaint? She said, before even sitting. It has potential. We ordered coffee. Hers was oat milk and cinnamon. Mine was black. The first 10 minutes were nothing. She asked how the air felt out here. If the mice had left me alone. Whether I still kept that ugly flannel shirt I wore in college, I let her talk. Then she pulled out a folder. I thought maybe we could do this the right way, she said, sliding it toward me like a waitress offering dessert. It was titled, Joint Stewardship Agreement. I didn't touch it. She kept going. You've done an amazing job out there. I really mean that. And I thought, it just makes sense to combine efforts. My foundation can get things moving. Grants, press, real restoration. I opened the folder. Legalese. Tight, sharp. Paragraphs masked as generosity. Control shifted under the language. One line said, full operational authority may be assigned to Truitt Family Legacy Fund at its discretion. I looked up. You came all this way to claim something you think I don't understand. She smiled like I was a toddler learning to walk. We're stronger together, Mavis. Stronger for what? She blinked. Look, I know things were uneven, but this way, you don't have to worry about taxes, renovations, PR. We've got a whole team. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a check. It's not much, just something to help you get settled. I folded the paper, slid it back to her. I'm not the one unsettled here. I stood, left my coffee untouched. She didn't follow me. Back at the cabin, I lit the stove and tried to forget it. That night, a notification blinked on my phone. A DM. Dean. Hey. Heard you're doing well. Crazy about the cabin story. Proud of you. Want to talk? I read it twice. He'd disappeared right before I left for Montana. Said I was wasting my 20s, playing woodshop in a ghost house. Told me to sell. Start over. No one wants to marry a woman who makes furniture with termites. And now he wanted to talk. I didn't answer, just deleted the message. Not because I was angry, but because some things don't deserve a second version. I stayed up late that night, pacing. Then I wrote a letter. Not to Dean, not to Blythe, to her foundation. I do not consent to any claim, public or private, over land or inheritance granted to me directly. Any further attempt will be treated as legal aggression. No frills, no venom, just the facts. The next morning I began building a file. Every deed, every call, every manipulation, Blythe had slipped into a smile. Screenshots, printouts, voice memos. They thought they were being smart, but they never planned for me to be quiet and strategic. They expected a woman with nothing to lose. They forgot I had everything to protect. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer beneath the table, slid it under the deed. On top, I placed the napkin from the cafe, still carrying the ring from her untouched latte. The pings woke me up. I'd left my phone on the kitchen counter the night before, battery half dead, mind even worse off. But that morning, it buzzed like it had something to say. I didn't expect good news. I stopped expecting that a long time ago. The headline hit me before the coffee even finished brewing. Legacy Leaders, Blythe Truitt's mission to preserve family history. There was her face again, smiling like she'd just discovered oxygen. Below it, pictures of the cabin, pictures I'd taken. Angles only I would know, one from behind the cedar tree, another through the cracked window I'd covered with plastic the first week I arrived. even one from the porch, showing a blurry figure that could have been anyone. But it wasn't anyone. It was me, sweeping. My name? Nowhere. Quote from Blythe. Restoration is about vision, and I always knew this place had potential. Quote from Judith. She's always been the one to carry our family name forward. I laughed. Short, flat. No amusement in it, just breath. I didn't know what else to do with. They weren't just twisting the truth, they were branding it. I opened the comments. Too many hearts, too many fire emojis, too many people tagging their friends like they'd just stumbled across something inspirational. My face wasn't in the article, but my work was. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Later that day, I got a text from Dana, an old friend from high school. Did you approve that footage, or are they pulling some shady PR again? Footage? I checked Blythe's foundation page, pinned at the top. A new promotional video. I watched it. The opening shot was slow, scenic, a wide pan across the cabin, warm-toned filter, faint piano music. Then a cut. Someone walking through the main room, wearing my boots, holding my ledger, my movements, my kitchen layout, my coat on the hook in the background. But they never showed my face. Voiceover. Sometimes, heritage needs a leader to awaken it. Closing screen. Directed by the Truitt Foundation. Footage courtesy of Internal Restoration Team. They'd taken footage from my own camera, the one I installed for safety, the one I never shared with anyone. Someone had accessed the cloud. My hands curled into fists. They used me, I whispered. Again. But I didn't scream, didn't post a video reply, didn't light a match and threaten war. I printed every frame of that video, every screenshot of that article, each one labeled with the date, time, and original file name. I started a new binder. Cover. Evidence of false attribution. Then I called Ezra. He didn't ask why I was calling, just said, "I'm ready when you are." We scheduled a formal cease and desist. Voice memo to self. They expected me to break down, or break silence. But they forgot. I was already broken. That's why I don't flinch anymore. I opened another folder on my laptop. What I did. What they claimed. One tab full of receipts, repairs, maps, the other full of glossy fictions. I lined them up side by side on my screen. A split truth. A quiet war. That night, I lit the stove, sat at the table, same one Grandpa Ellis built from leftover beams, and for the first time, I wrote my own story. Not for the paper, not for the web, not even for court, just for me. I wrote about the first winter I spent in that cabin, about the time I slipped on the porch and laughed so hard I scared the birds off the roof, about the morning I woke up to deer prints outside the door and thought, maybe, I could still belong to something. I recorded voice memos, told them out loud, timelines, details, feelings I didn't know I remembered. My voice was shaky at first, but it found its rhythm. They used to say I was too quiet, I said into the recorder. But maybe they weren't listening to what I was actually saying. I ended the last memo with 6 words, "You don't get to do this." Then I leaned back, closed my laptop, and waited for the next knock I knew was coming. It was early. The frost hadn't burned off the window yet. I was pouring coffee when I noticed something tucked beneath the doorframe. Not mailed. No stamp. Just slid under like a threat that didn't want to leave fingerprints. Plain white envelope. No return address. My name typed neatly in the center. I opened it. Inside was a transcript, typed, formatted like an official record. It claimed I had agreed, verbally, to transfer the cabin's land rights to Blythe in exchange for a family trust stipend. There were quotes. My name. My supposed statements. A signature that looked like mine if you'd only glanced at it once. But I didn't sign it. And I sure as hell never said any of the things in that document. Beneath the transcript was a second page, an email chain, Blythe's team, legal language, mentions of media alignment and inheritance optics. Words that made my skin crawl. I grabbed a pair of gloves, slipped the envelope into a plastic sleeve. Labeled it, Forgery Evidence 01. They weren't trying to negotiate anymore. They were building a narrative. I dialed Calhoun's number. The man hadn't heard from me in months, but when he picked up, he didn't sound surprised. "I've been waiting for your call," he said. I told him what they'd done. He let me talk, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he sighed. Long, heavy. "I kept a copy," he said, "of Ellis's original will, the one before all this revisionist history." He told me the family had pressured him to step aside, that the newer will was brought in by someone else, notarized under different circumstances. "I couldn't fight it then," he said, "but I can help you now." 5 minutes later, a PDF landed in my inbox. Scanned, watermarked, dated before any of Blythe's paperwork ever existed. My name printed clearly. Sole beneficiary. No conditions. No fine print. I printed it, stapled it, slid it into the front of my binder under a tab I labeled True Last Will, Verified. I didn't feel relief. I felt equipped. Later that day, another email pinged into my inbox. It wasn't addressed to me originally. Looked like someone had forwarded it by accident. Subject, Truett Property Tax Estimate. It was from a bank. Attached was a tax form filed under Blythe's name for parcels she didn't legally own. One of them was mine. I called the county office. Spoke to a clerk named Janet, who sounded like she'd rather be anywhere else. But when I gave her the parcel number, her tone changed. "That's still in your name," she said. "There's been a lot of assumption here, but no filings. If you move first, the case is yours to win." I closed my laptop and whispered, "That's exactly what I'll do." The next 2 days, I didn't leave the cabin. I laid everything out. The forged transcript, the fake signature, the manipulated will, the real one, the tax error. I created a timeline: when Blythe first made contact, when she posted the video, when the forged document showed up. Ezra got digital copies. Calhoun got a full scan. One binder went into a fireproof box I buried beneath the cabin floor, and one physical package stayed with me. I drafted an email. Subject line, Official Claim of Inheritance and Rights Reinstatement. I stared at the cursor for a long time before hitting send. Then I walked to the drawer, pulled out the stitched tablecloth Grandpa always used for holiday dinners. The one with the burn mark on the edge from a candle that tipped too far one Thanksgiving. The only thing in this cabin still soft. I wrapped the original will in it, set it in the middle of the table. Voice memo to self. They thought I was holding on to a shack. They didn't know I was holding a dynasty. The article dropped at 6:42 a.m. Ezra hadn't warned me. He knew better. But I could tell by the way the air in the room changed. There's a kind of silence that happens before something hits. A stillness that feels like breath held by the world. Local press picked it up first, then a few national threads. Headline, Soul Heir Speaks Out, Forged Will, Silenced Legacy, and the Woman Who Reclaimed Her Family's Truth. They had everything. The timeline, the forgery, the comparison between the original will and the fabricated one. The video footage lifted from my cabin security system, the fake verbal agreement transcript. My binder had done its job. They didn't just print my name, they printed my truth. The comment sections caught fire. How many daughters get erased because they don't play the part? She wasn't invisible. She was ignored. This story feels too familiar. I read them, not all, just enough to know I wasn't the only one. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just refilled my coffee and sat at the kitchen table as the Montana wind pressed against the windows like it wanted to see what came next. I didn't need them to believe me. I needed them to stop pretending I never existed. 2 days later, a formal invitation arrived in the mailbox out by the road. Handwritten in calligraphy, white envelope, heavy paper, the kind you use when you want to look sincere. Judith's memorial. The card was signed in ink, with love, Blythe. I didn't go, didn't RSVP, but a friend from San Antonio sent me a photo from the service. Rows of matching white chairs under a tent, an altar with floral arrangements in muted earth tones, and right in the front row, one empty chair, no nameplate, no mention. But it was there. That seat was mine. They never said it aloud, but it was clear. I stood at the edge of my land that same morning, boots in the dirt, eyes on the tree line. "You had your chance," I said, "to listen when I was standing. And that was all. That was enough." 3 days later, Ezra mailed me a letter, not an email, a real one. You didn't just win a case, he wrote. You set precedent. You carved a space where silence used to live. He included a printout of a comment someone had left under the article, a woman I didn't know. Mavis didn't reclaim her place. She made a new one. That line stuck with me. I took the letter, folded it clean, and placed it beside the deed, beside Grandpa's original will, beside the printouts of every attempt to rewrite what I'd lived, not to display, not to frame, just to keep, a quiet archive of truth. Peace came slowly, not like thunder, not like vindication, more like a door being closed gently after years of being left ajar. Justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in the sound of no one correcting you anymore. I woke up that weekend with a mind clear enough to think about something else. Not the cabin, not Blythe, not what was stolen or what was proven. I made coffee, sat at the table, the same one where I first laid out the deed, the same one where I had written my voice memos, now sanded, stained, sturdy. I laid out the stitched tablecloth. The burn mark from that old candle was still there. I opened a new notebook. This one wasn't labeled with dates or exhibit numbers. I began writing, not for anyone else, not even for the courts, just a letter, to her, the girl I used to be, the one who didn't speak up because she thought silence was grace, the one who shrank in the presence of their performance and thought that made her humble, not erased. I wrote, "You weren't lost, you were unheard, and you're not anymore." I signed it, set the pen down, opened the cabin door. The morning air was cold, but not cruel. And for once, I walked toward something instead of away.